You know, the Gospel of John is all about one fundamental choice. And according to theologian Dr. Robert Peterson, this choice isn't just some minor theme, it's the key that unlocks the whole book. So in this explainer, we're going to break down how every single story and every argument really forces you to make one critical decision. So, what is this big, defining choice? Well, you have to understand, the Gospel of John isn't written like a simple biography. Nope. It's more like a courtroom case. It's presenting evidence, it's making arguments, and it demands a verdict from you, the reader. That one decision is right at the heart of everything we're about to unpack. And that brings us to what we can call a tale of two responses. Because right from the very first chapter, the gospel lays it all out. There are only two possible ways to react to Jesus. And this isn't just an introduction, it's the actual blueprint for the entire story that follows. So the choice is laid out as two totally different paths. Think of it like two doors. In verses 10 and 11, you have the closed door. Dr. Peterson calls this a colossal rejection. I mean, the world literally rejects its own creator. It's a hard no. But then, verses 12 and 13 show us the open door, a definitive yes. For everyone who receives him, who believes, something incredible happens. They become children of God. So, rejection or belief, that's the choice. It's that simple. In this tension, this constant pull between rejection and belief becomes the engine that drives the whole gospel forward. It explains all the conflict we see, for sure, but it also points to the book's ultimate purpose, that you might believe and have life. And to really show us how this works, the gospel gives us two really powerful case studies. So first up, we meet Nicodemus. Now, if anyone on earth should have understood who Jesus was, it was this guy. He was the ultimate religious insider, a man who had every possible advantage you could think of. But, as we're about to see, he struggles. A lot. I mean, just look at this resume. Nicodemus had it all. He was a man, a Jew, a highly respected Pharisee, a member of the Sanhedrin, the highest court in the land, and a famous teacher. He was at the absolute peak of religious and social status. By any worldly standard, he was as close to God as you could possibly get. And yet, after all that, what does Jesus say to him? This: "You are the teacher of Israel, and yet you do not understand these things." Despite all his credentials, all his knowledge, Nicodemus is completely in the dark. He can't wrap his head around the most basic spiritual truth, the need to be born again. It seems his insider status was actually more of a barrier than a bridge. Now, for a total contrast, let's turn to a complete outsider. Our second case study is the Samaritan woman at the well. And talk about a 180. She had every disadvantage. She was the ultimate outsider. Exactly the kind of person Nicodemus would have considered unclean and just unworthy. Her profile is basically the mirror image of Nicodemus's. She's a woman in a man's world. She's a Samaritan, which the Jews saw as a heretical, half-breed group. And on top of all that, she has a shady past that's made her a social outcast even in her own town. She is on the absolute bottom rung of the social and religious ladder. And when you put them side by side like this, wow, the contrast couldn't be more clear. The respected teacher is baffled and confused, while the outcast woman not only gets it, she believes and immediately runs off to tell everyone. You know, Dr. Peterson points out that John doesn't actually quote the saying, "God humbles the proud and exalts the humble," but he demonstrates it perfectly right here. God's ways are definitely not our ways. But this brings up a really good question. Is all belief equal? Well, not quite. Dr. Peterson highlights that the Gospel of John introduces this concept of inadequate faith. This is the kind of belief that looks real on the surface. Maybe it's a reaction to seeing a cool miracle, but it isn't a true, deep, saving faith. It's a faith that's more concerned with what people think, with loving the glory that comes from other humans more than the glory that comes from God. So you have people who believe, but Jesus, knowing what's really in their hearts, doesn't actually entrust himself to them. Okay, so if the big choice is to believe or reject, and we know that even some forms of belief fall short, how does the gospel make its case? How does it try to persuade the reader? Well, that brings us to our next section, the witnesses. This is where the narrative really shifts gears and starts to feel like a real courtroom drama. To deal with this fundamental choice, the gospel starts to systematically call a series of witnesses to the stand, one by one, each presenting evidence to prove Jesus' claims and force a verdict from the audience.
So in John chapter 5, Jesus basically builds his own legal defense by calling 5 key witnesses. First, he calls John the Baptist. Then he points to his own works, the miracles. Then he calls on the ultimate authority, God the Father. He even puts the scriptures themselves on the stand. And finally, Jesus himself testifies, saying he's in perfect agreement with the Father. It's a rock-solid case, built from every possible angle.
And this is one of the most shocking moments in the whole trial. Jesus turns to the religious leaders, the same people who prided themselves on following Moses, and he hits them with this zinger. He tells them that the very person they claim to follow, Moses, is actually their accuser. Why? Because Moses wrote about Jesus, and they refuse to believe it. It's just a stunning reversal that gets right to the heart of their unbelief. So this brings us to the conclusion. The evidence has been presented. The case studies of belief and rejection, Nicodemus and the Samaritan woman, have been shown. The witnesses have all testified. And now, the gospel turns to its reader. It turns to you. So let's just pull the key takeaways together really quick. First, the Gospel of John is built around one single choice: to reject or to believe. Second, it shows this through these incredible stories that reveal how spiritual truth can come from the most unlikely people. And third, it builds its case like a legal trial, calling witness after witness to the stand. And so, the gospel leaves us with this final thought. It's presented all its evidence, the signs, the teachings, the witnesses, and then it asks for a verdict from each one of us. It confronts us with that exact same choice from the very beginning. The real question isn't just about what the text says, but what is it that makes one person see all this evidence and reject it, while another person sees the exact same evidence and believes? That's the question right at the very heart of John's gospel.